Welcome back, guys. In today's episode, I'm sharing 10 true creepy stories about being home alone deep in the Appalachian wilderness. So grab your blanket, keep the lights low, and remember, out here in the Appalachians, being alone doesn't always mean you're by yourself. But before we continue, if you're new here, make sure to subscribe and don't forget to like and share. Thank you all. Now, let's begin. My cousin Jesse was heading out on a long haul and offered me his cabin for a couple of weeks. Said I could use the peace to clear my head and knock out a mountain of freelance work I'd been dragging my feet on. It sits halfway up a hill in Auburn Ridge, tucked far enough back that the driveway turns to gravel before you even see the roof. The first few days were honestly kind of perfect. I fell into this simple routine: chop a little firewood in the morning, work for a few hours with coffee and music on low, and spend the evenings flipping through old paperbacks he kept on a shelf made from 2 cinder blocks and a plank. The place had no internet and barely enough signal to text if you stood in the right spot on the porch and held your phone up like a divining rod. But that was the point. Reset, rest, get some stuff done. The cabin itself felt dependable. It creaked a little when you walked, sure, but not randomly. It was the kind of old that made sense. Solid beams, heavy doors, everything built to last. You'd feel safe sleeping through a thunderstorm in there. I liked that. I needed that. I needed that. Only thing that stood out early on was the front door. If I didn't use the deadbolt, it would sometimes swing open just a crack on its own. Not every time, and never wide, but enough that I started double-checking it before bed. I figured the latch was loose or the frame was warped. Jesse probably hadn't noticed or didn't care. Still, it bugged me. By day 4, I was in a groove. That afternoon, I was trying to upload a signed contract and couldn't get it to go through from the cabin, so I hiked up behind the shed with my laptop. That hill's steeper than it looks, by the way. You think, no problem, and then halfway up you're sweating and your calves are mad at you. Anyway, I got up there, found the signal, and the file finally sent. While I stood there waiting to make sure the email cleared, I heard something behind me. Not branches snapping or a squirrel scurrying, actual footsteps. Slow, heavy ones. The kind that crunch evenly through dead leaves. Not rushed, just steady. I turned, expecting to see some old guy walking a dog or checking deer cameras or whatever people do out here. But the second I moved, the sound stopped. Not faded, just stopped. Completely. I looked around for maybe 30 seconds, scanned the woods, didn't see anything, no movement, no sound. It was quiet in that weird way where even birds go silent. I stood there longer than I probably needed to, then walked back down. Coming around the shed, the first thing I saw was the cabin door, wide open. Not cracked, open. I stopped right at the edge of the clearing. My stomach did this weird little drop. I stood there just watching it like maybe something would walk back out, but nothing did. Eventually, I went in. Everything inside looked completely normal. No mess, no signs of anyone. I even opened every closet and checked under the couch like a paranoid idiot, but it was all exactly how I'd left it. Still, I didn't sleep great that night. I kept thinking I heard footsteps on the porch again, but every time I looked, it was just trees and darkness. Once I swear I heard the swing creak, but I didn't check. I told myself it was the wind, even though there was no breeze. 2 days later, I went to the firewood stack behind the shed. As I pulled a few logs off the top, I noticed something tucked in the corner, wedged between the bottom row and the wall of the shed. It was a glove. Small, mitt, clearly handmade. The kind a kid would wear. It had dirt and leaf bits stuck in the yarn like it had been outside for a while. But it wasn't there when I stacked the wood that first day. I would have seen it. I just stared at it for a while. Then I left it there and went back inside. That night, I got a little paranoid. Locked every window, deadbolted the front door, pulled the chair from the kitchen, and wedged it under the knob like some kind of bad movie cliche. I even clicked on the porch light and left it running. Around 3, I woke up thirsty. I shuffled to the kitchen, still half asleep, and froze in the doorway. The front door was open again. Not all the way, just a few inches. enough that I felt the cold sneaking in, and enough that I could see the porch light spilling onto the floorboards outside. I stood there in the dark, completely still. My fingers went cold. The chair was off to the side like someone had nudged it out of the way, barely, but enough. I closed the door, locked it again, and didn't go back to bed. Just sat there on the couch wrapped in a blanket, waiting for morning. I told myself I was being dramatic, sleep-deprived, overworked. I thought about packing up, but it felt ridiculous to flee over a door that wouldn't stay shut. Next morning, I needed to clear my head. I grabbed a thermos and headed up the ridge. A thick fog had rolled in, though, which made the woods feel too quiet again. I kept walking anyway, hoping it'd lift. About halfway up, I spotted something on a branch just ahead of me, hanging at eye level like someone had placed it there on purpose. It was the other glove. Same size, same knit, same dirty bits clinging to the wool. I stared at it for a long time. Then I carefully took it down and walked it back to the cabin. I didn't bring it inside. I just laid it next to the first one behind the shed and didn't touch them again. That night was worse. I had the door blocked, lights on, windows locked. Still couldn't sleep. Around midnight, I heard the porch board shift. Not like an animal scampering across them, more like someone standing there, shifting weight from one foot to the other. I held my breath. The chair was still pressed against the knob. No one had come in. Then the swing creaked. Once, then again, then a pause, then again. A steady rhythm, like someone was just sitting out there in the dark, rocking gently back and forth. It went on for nearly 10 minutes. Creak, pause, creak, pause. I sat on the edge of the bed with the flashlight clutched in both hands, heart pounding. I didn't dare move. Eventually, it stopped. I waited for something, anything. A knock, a voice, the sound of footsteps leaving. But it stayed silent until dawn. When the sun finally started to rise, I opened the front door. The swing was still moving, just slightly, like it had been vacated a moment before, and on the seat, folded neatly like a gift, were the two gloves. I didn't grab my stuff, didn't clean up. I locked the cabin out of habit, though it felt like a joke by that point. I hiked up to the spot with signal and called Jesse. I didn't even explain. Just said, "I'm done. Something's not right out here." He didn't ask questions. Just said, "That's fine. Don't bring anything from there back with you. Just go." So I did. Drove straight to my parents' place in Elkins. My parents had gone to help my uncle move into his new place in Grove Hills, a couple of hours south. I was supposed to go too, but I had this math competition that weekend, regional level. So they left me behind for the weekend. It wasn't a big deal. I'd stayed home alone before, and my dad didn't like leaving the house totally empty anyway. We lived just outside a little town called Briar Hollow, right at the edge of the Appalachian woods. Our house was old, boxy, built by my grandfather after he left the mines. It creaked when it got cold, but it had always felt sturdy. Familiar, nothing eerie about it. That first night was totally normal. I made ramen, watched a DVD on the old TV in my parents' room, and crashed in their bed. Their room always felt cozier somehow, and their TV didn't need the internet, which was nice because our Wi-Fi barely stretched past the kitchen anyway. It was the second night when things shifted. I woke up to static. Loud, white noise static. Now, I hadn't fallen asleep watching cable, it was just a DVD, so the screen shouldn't have been making that sound. I sat up slowly and something felt off right away. It wasn't cold. It wasn't dark or scary exactly, but the air in the room had this thickness to it, like walking into a room where someone had just been arguing. Tense, like someone was still there. Then I noticed the hallway light was on. I hadn't turned it on. That was enough to get me moving. I got up, walked through the house room by room, checking every door and window. Front lock, back lock, kitchen windows, den windows, even the little side window in the laundry room. Everything was sealed tight. Nothing was open or broken. I told myself it was just a power hiccup. Maybe the light flicked on during a brief surge or something. Old house, old wiring, right? But the DVD had stopped entirely. The disc was out, like someone had taken it out and left the player empty. The next morning, I decided to walk down to the mailbox. It was a little under a quarter mile from the house, just down a gravel path that curved off the main road. Usually, I only checked it when I knew a package or a letter was coming, but I needed to get out. That weird feeling from the night before hadn't left. It just kind of sat in my gut like a rock. There wasn't any mail that day, but tucked under the red flag was an old Polaroid photo. The kind that curls at the corners when it's been damp too long. It was a picture of our front porch. You could see the screen door, the living room window, and in the window, me, asleep. Only I hadn't been near that window the night before. I hadn't even opened it. And I sure hadn't gone outside or stood there long enough for someone to take a picture. I just stood there for a few minutes staring at it, trying to make it make sense. Then I walked back to the house, locked everything again, even checked under the beds, which I hadn't done in years. I tried calling my mom. Straight to voicemail. Tried my dad next. Same thing. I even called our landline just to see if it rang. It did, but nobody picked up. That night, I didn't even try sleeping upstairs again. I dragged a blanket down to the den, grabbed the baseball bat we kept by the back door, and turned on every single light I could find. I figured if anything was going to mess with me again, I'd at least see it coming. I must have dozed off at some point. The next thing I remember was the microwave beeping. It was 4 in the morning. The digital display just flashed EPINed, like the power had gone out and come back on, but the other clocks in the house, on the stove, in the den, were still set. Nothing else had reset, just the microwave. I opened it. Inside was a single dinner fork. Clean. Just sitting there in the middle of the turntable like it had been placed down, gently. We didn't even store forks in drawers. My mom had this glass mason jar on the counter where she kept all the utensils. She said it felt cozier than drawers. Whatever. The point is, there's no way that fork ended up in the microwave by accident. I didn't touch anything else. I took the fork out, put it on the table, and just stood there for a while. Then I checked every cabinet, every door again. Nothing out of place. Eventually, I slipped the fork into my backpack. I don't really know why. I guess I wanted proof. Something to hold on to in case I started questioning myself. I didn't sleep again that night. Just sat in the den with the TV muted and kept my eyes on the back door. I don't think I blinked for hours. Around 9 the next morning, my dad finally answered. He was cheerful. Said they'd be back by dinner time and to leave the porch light on in case they got delayed. I didn't tell him about the photo or the fork or the microwave. Instead, I told him I was heading to my friend Tasha's place for the day, said I'd be back before dark. But I didn't go to Tasha's. I walked back down to the mailbox. Another Polaroid was waiting. This one showed the inside of the house, the staircase. And near the edge of the frame, down in the bottom corner, was a blurry shape. A figure. Just a hint of a person. You could barely see their hand, but it was resting on the banister. I turned around and looked back at the house. I didn't go inside. I waited right there at the edge of the driveway until my parents got home. Must have been hours. I sat on my backpack and watched the trees shift in the wind. When my dad pulled in, he got out of the car looking confused, asked me what I was doing sitting out there with my stuff like I was waiting for a bus. I told him I'd locked myself out. He believed me. Inside, everything was in its place. No signs of entry. No Polaroids. No missing forks. But later that evening, when I went upstairs, I found my backpack on the floor. It was open, and inside was the fork, wrapped in a napkin. I didn't say anything. Just quietly put it in the closet and went to bed, with the lights on. My sister and I inherited a cabin a few years back. It's tucked deep in the hills outside a little mountain town called Elbridge, way down in the southern stretch of West Virginia. She lives up in Vermont and wanted no part of it. I was in Roanoke at the time, not close exactly, but closer than her, so the upkeep kind of landed on me. I didn't mind. The cabin's not much. Single story, metal roof, long gravel driveway that's more pothole than road, It's got one of those old propane heaters that clicks every few minutes, and the floor sags just enough to notice. There's a crawl space under it, which I've never been curious enough to explore, and a tiny shed out back that's more rust than structure. The closest neighbor is probably a mile and a half down the road. Real quiet older couple who only show up on weekends. I've only seen them twice, and both times they waved like I was just another tree. The place has no internet, barely any cell service. If I stand on the porch, right next to one particular support post and hold my phone up at a weird angle, I can maybe send a text. But I like that about it. I'd drive in with a few books, a cooler full of groceries, some tools, and stay for a few days just doing whatever needed doing. Trim a window, fix a screen, paint the railing. Sometimes I didn't do anything but read and listen to the wind. But the last time I went up there, something changed. I'd driven in on a Tuesday morning. It was early April, one of those gray weeks where the rain never fully stops, just drizzles off and on until everything smells like wet leaves and damp earth. I planned to stay until Friday afternoon, just long enough to patch the back steps and maybe clean out the gutters. Tuesday and Wednesday were normal, uneventful. I replaced some rotting boards on the porch, patched a hole in the shed, and even managed to cook myself a halfway decent stew on the old gas stove. I slept surprisingly well, considering the heater's tendency to click and groan like it's talking in its sleep. Thursday was quieter than usual. No birds. No wind, really. Just stillness. I noticed it sometime around noon while I was sitting on the porch with a sandwich. Normally there'd be squirrels chattering or birds rustling in the brush out back, but it was dead silent. Even the trees seemed like they were holding their breath. That evening, around 9, I was inside on the couch, reading. One of those old used paperbacks with a broken spine and somebody else's notes scribbled in the margins. I'd just flipped the page when I heard knocking. Not from the front door, from the back. I didn't react at first. There's no porch out back, just a narrow strip of dirt and then straight woods. You'd have to come through brush and trees to even reach that door. It doesn't have steps, just kind of sags onto the slope. No one comes to that side, ever. But the knock came again. 3 slow, spaced-out knocks. I remember the way they sounded solid. Too steady to be the wind, too intentional to be anything else. I sat completely still for a few seconds trying to process it. Then I got up and made my way to the kitchen, which has the only window that faces that part of the woods. I didn't want to turn on the light, but I needed to see. I reached over and flipped the back floodlight switch. The motion sensors should have kicked in if anything was moving out there. Nothing. I squinted out through the glass. All I could see was the wet shine of dirt, a few trees swaying just a little. No figure, no shadows moving. Just the same stretch of woods I'd seen every trip. I stood there for maybe a full minute, listening. My ears felt like they were stretching, picking up every creak in the walls. Eventually, I turned off the light and went back to the couch. Tried to keep reading, but the words weren't sticking anymore. It felt like something had shifted in the room. I kept glancing at the window even though I couldn't see it from where I sat. Every sentence I read felt strange, like I was reading aloud in a room with someone listening. Then I heard the porch boards groan. This cabin creaks all the time, but this was different. You get used to the sound of the house settling. This was weight. 3 clear steps, slow, heavy, and then nothing. I turned off the lamp and sat frozen in the dark. From where I was, I had a partial view of the front window. It has a sheer curtain over it, thin enough that indoor light makes it glow a bit even when the room's dark. And I saw it. A shape, not a clear one. Just the outline of something standing there. Still, right behind the curtain, blocking the glow. It didn't move. Didn't knock. Just stood there. I stared at it so long my eyes started to sting. Then it tilted slightly. Not like it turned its head, more like it leaned, like it was looking in, adjusting. That was enough. I backed down the hallway, grabbed my keys off the hook by the kitchen, and slipped out through the side door. I didn't even put on my boots, just ran across the gravel in socks, wincing with every step. My truck was parked at the edge of the drive, maybe 100 feet from the cabin. I didn't look back until I was inside, doors locked, engine running. The house looked still, nothing in the window, no movement. I turned off the headlights and sat in the dark, trying to slow my breathing. Every minute dragged. Then something moved. Along the left side of the house toward the shed. It didn't walk, it glided. Upright, fast, not running, not stumbling, just sliding past, like someone in a hurry but not rushed. It disappeared behind the cabin before I could fully register it. I turned the lights on, aimed the beams at the trees. Nothing. I sat there for over an hour, watching, listening. My eyes kept drifting to the mirror, like maybe I'd catch it behind me somehow. Eventually, the rational part of my brain started talking louder. Maybe it was someone, a hunter who'd gotten turned around, a prankster, a drunk local with poor judgment. There was no damage to the house, no broken windows. I hadn't actually seen anything up close, so I did the stupid thing. I went back in, crept up the steps, keys in one hand, flashlight in the other, slipped inside, locked the door behind me, dragged a heavy chair under the knob, and sat down on the couch. Lights off, keys in my lap, phone open to dial, just in case. I didn't sleep, just stared at the window until the sky started to lighten. But in the morning, I went out to check. The dirt near the back door, no prints. None near the front window either. The ground was soft, rain had soaked it pretty good the day before, so I should have seen something if anyone had walked there. But around the sides of the cabin, in a wide looping path that circled through the trees and crossed behind the shed, there were footprints, dozens of them. That was it. I left before noon, didn't even finish my coffee. Threw everything into the truck and got out of there. I pay a local guy now, a friend of a friend named Rudy, to handle the basics. He mows, patches things up when needed, sends me pictures when I ask. Says the place is quiet, peaceful even. My cousin Ellie had to fly out to New Mexico for a few weeks, some sort of emergency staffing thing for a geological survey group she freelanced with, and asked if I could stay at her place while she was gone. She offered it like it was no big deal. Just feed the dogs and check on the goats. That's literally all you need to do. Her cabin was about 20 minutes outside a little town called Marrow's Hollow, tucked into the foothills where West Virginia starts blending into the edge of Virginia. I was between jobs. I'd just been laid off from a marketing firm in Richmond, so a rent-free place to figure out my next step sounded great on paper. I packed up my car, drove out on a Monday morning, and moved in like I was house-sitting for someone in another time zone. Ellie raised dogs, mostly hunting breeds, big lean ones with more muscle than I expected, and had a trio of goats she called her yard crew. I liked them. Quiet animals with dumb personalities, easy to take care of. Feed them in the morning, check their water, make sure they didn't try to eat something plastic. That was pretty much it. Her cabin sat alone at the end of a long dirt drive with no neighbors you could see from the house. The closest property was across a small creek and up a wooded hill, and even then you couldn't see their roof unless the trees were bare. It was private, peaceful. For the first few days, I actually liked it. I spent my mornings stacking wood and walking the property, afternoons applying to jobs at the town library where they still had a public computer terminal, and nights on the couch watching DVDs from Ellie's binder of ancient movies. Things like The Ninth Gate and 3 Days of the Condor. It was a weird little time capsule out there, but it felt fine, until the porch light. It was late, maybe around 10, and I had just come back inside after taking the trash out. Ellie didn't have trash pickup, just a big bin out back that you hauled into town when it filled up. I came around to the side and noticed the front porch light was on. Thing is, I'd never touched that switch. I wasn't even using the front door. I stared at it for a few seconds, trying to remember if I might have flipped it on accidentally. But I hadn't even gone near the front hall since I got there. Still, maybe I bumped a switch without realizing. It was easy to dismiss. I turned it off and didn't give it much weight. Next morning, I went out to feed the dogs and saw the shed door hanging open. Not all the way, just cracked but clearly unlatched. Now, I knew I'd shut it. It had one of those old hook and eye latches that made a scraping sound when you locked them, and I remembered doing it because, The hook was slightly bent and you had to give it a tug to make sure it held. There hadn't been any wind, no storms, and nothing else looked disturbed. No tools missing, nothing knocked over inside, just open, like someone had taken a look and walked away. I stood there for a while, staring at the ground, hoping I'd see some clue, mud, tracks, anything. But the dirt was dry and packed, and whatever had happened hadn't left a mark I could see. Still, I shut the door again and made sure the hook caught this time, tight. That night, I turned on every exterior light. Didn't say anything to Ellie. I figured I'd just imagined things or maybe hadn't latched the shed right. You second guess yourself fast in places like that. 3 days went by. Nothing else happened. Then one night, I was upstairs watching a movie, Jacob's Ladder maybe, when I heard the back screen door creak open. It was a very specific sound. The hinges gave this long squeal, then a sharp metallic snap when the spring slammed it closed. I recognized it instantly. I paused the movie and just sat there, heart in my throat, listening. Nothing else followed. No second creak, no footfalls on the wooden deck, just silence. I waited there for over an hour, didn't move, kept the volume off. Even when I finally stood up, I didn't go downstairs. Just sat in the hallway outside the bedroom, holding a flashlight, waiting for something more. Nothing came. But I didn't sleep much that night. Next morning, the goats were acting weird. All 3 of them were crammed into the corner of their lean-to, even though the weather was mild and dry. I figured maybe a coyote had come sniffing around, but they weren't acting scared. They were huddled like they didn't want to move at all. That's when I saw the feed bucket tipped over. I'd left it propped against the wall like always, but now it was dumped and there were wet boot prints in the dirt near it. Not mine. I checked. My boots were still clean, and I hadn't worn them in days. The prints were smaller, with a different tread, one I didn't recognize. That night, I made a point of checking every door and window twice. I even used a stick to prop the back door shut and lock the shed again with a chain. The dogs were uneasy. Tank, the big shepherd mix, paced for hours and kept pausing at the screen door like he could hear something I couldn't. At one point, around 2 in the morning, I dragged his bed into the front room and just sat with him. He didn't sleep. Just lay there, ears twitching, occasionally letting out these low grumbles. Nothing else happened that night. Then came the rain. I woke up at 4:30 to find the upstairs hallway light on. I hadn't touched that switch in days. It made a loud click you could hear across the cabin, and it wasn't something you'd turn on by accident, especially not from bed. I got up, heart racing, and did another sweep with the poker from the fireplace. All the windows were locked. The doors were still bolted. But the basement door, the one in the kitchen, tucked behind the pantry, was open, only an inch, but it was enough. That door stayed shut unless you turned the old metal latch, which made a sound like cracking your knuckles when it snapped into place. I hadn't opened it since the second day, when I tripped the breaker using the microwave and a space heater at the same time. I pushed it shut, leaned a chair under the knob, and didn't sleep at all. Next night, the same thing happened. I know I turned off every light. I used a flashlight to go upstairs. Still, around midnight, that same hallway light was glowing again. I stood at the bottom of the stairs and just stared. I didn't want to go up. I didn't want to even see what might be waiting at the top. It wasn't that I thought someone was there. I just had this deep, crawling certainty that something had been there. The next morning, it was pouring. The dogs refused to go out, and the goats stayed tucked under their shelter, barely moving. I opened the front door to check the rain, and there they were, boot prints. Same tread, same size, leading from the woods straight to the back deck, and stopping. No return tracks. I didn't go upstairs that night. I dragged Ellie's camping cot into the living room, left the TV on low, and tried to pretend I was just being paranoid. Around 1 in the morning, the screen door creaked again. That snap of the spring. I didn't get up. I didn't even breathe for a full minute. Just stared at the ceiling, clutching my useless phone and listening. When the sun rose, I went out front. The prints were gone, washed clean by the rain. But when I looked up the stairs, the hallway light was on again. That afternoon, I packed everything I had and left. Told Ellie her animals were all fine, but something came up with my mom and I couldn't finish the week. My mom had to drive up to Madisonville for a family emergency, something sudden with my aunt's health. She asked if I wanted to come with her, but I had school and a quiz that week, and I figured I'd be fine holding down the fort for a few days. We live in a place called Briar Hollow, just outside of Spencer's Ridge. It's tucked way back in the trees, gravel road, long driveway, mailbox half-eaten by rust. The house itself has been in our family forever. My great-granddad built it from scratch in the 50s, and it looks like it. There's nothing charming or vintage about it. No antique character. Just tired wood, peeling trim, and a draft that seems to come from every corner even with all the windows shut. But it's home. One odd thing about it. Our attic isn't the pull-down kind with the string and ladder. It has its own actual door, like a regular room. It's right at the end of the upstairs hallway, between my bedroom and the old sewing room that nobody really uses anymore. Inside the attic, it's not finished. No drywall, no insulation, just beams, nails, and the occasional spider that somehow ends up way bigger than it should be. Behind all that, there's this crawl space. Low ceiling, tight width, runs the full length of the attic along the back wall. We used to call it the tunnel when we were little. My brother Cal and I would crawl in there with flashlights and pretend we were on secret missions. Eventually, we outgrew it, literally and mentally, and the crawl space just became one of those forgotten corners of the house. We kept the little door to it shut, no lock, just a wooden latch. But it stayed closed. That week, with Mom gone, I was on my own. The first night was fine. I made myself ramen, watched a movie, stayed up way too late texting Max and Alana from school. Just normal stuff. I remember the microwave light was the only thing on in the kitchen while I scrolled through my phone. Around 10:30, I noticed the motion light in the backyard come on. That happens sometimes. We've got deer, raccoons, the occasional nosy fox. I got up, looked out the kitchen window. Nothing. The light buzzed softly but didn't catch anything moving. I figured the wind or a branch set it off and went back to the couch. Maybe 10 minutes later, I saw the front porch light blink on. Now that one's different. It's one of those heat sensor lights. Doesn't just react to movement. It picks up body heat. I sat up straight, phone still in my hand, and turned to look out the narrow window near the door. Couldn't see anything from that angle. I walked over and checked through the peephole. Porch was empty, no car sounds, no footsteps, nothing. Still, something felt wrong. Not panic exactly, just this buzzing sense in my chest like something was watching me through a wall I couldn't see through. I clicked the deadbolt shut even though I knew I'd already locked it earlier. Then I turned off the living room light and stood there for a minute trying to listen through the silence. That quiet can feel thick sometimes, like it's pressing in on your ears. I was just about to head back to the couch when I heard a dull thud from upstairs. Not loud, but solid, like something heavy had shifted. My eyes went straight to the ceiling. All the windows were closed. Nothing was running upstairs, no fans, no vents. We didn't even have central air. Then it happened again. A second thud, sharper this time, closer. I didn't want to believe it, but I knew where it came from. The attic. I went to the coat rack by the front door and grabbed the old baseball bat my dad left behind when he moved out. I held it like I'd seen in movies, hands tight near the bottom, elbows stiff. I didn't feel brave, I just felt like I needed to have something in my hands before I moved. Every step up the stairs felt like it echoed. I took them slowly, listening between each one, waiting to hear something else. When I reached the top, I stared at the attic door. It was closed. I don't know what made me do it, but I knocked, just once. Lightly. It felt like a weird instinct, like I was asking permission or bracing for something to knock back. Nothing. I opened the door. It creaked like always. The attic was dim. There's just a single bulb hanging in the center on a string. I pulled it. Light flickered on. Everything looked normal. Boxes stacked near the wall. Some old clothes in plastic tubs. Dust swirling in the air like it always did. But the crawl space door in the back, it was ajar. Not wide, but enough to see that it wasn't shut. We never left it open. Ever. Ever. I walked across the attic slowly, every step crunching dust and grit under my shoes. I bent down and shined my phone light into the crawl space. The light barely cut through, maybe 4 or 5 feet in, and then just black. A heavy, thick dark that didn't feel like regular darkness, more like something was waiting just past where the light stopped. That's when I heard it. A soft scuffing sound, like something brushing against the wooden floor. Not fast or loud, just a subtle drag, like a hand or a piece of cloth moving across the planks. I froze. Then came the click. The light bulb above me went out. I bolted. I didn't close the attic door gently. I slammed it, shoved the latch in, then backed away fast. I didn't even go down the stairs. I went to my room, flung open the window, and dropped straight into the backyard barefoot. I ran behind the barn where the cell signal's strongest and called my Uncle Jude. I was shaking so bad I dropped the phone trying to unlock it. He picked up right away, probably confused why I was breathing like I'd sprinted a mile. He was at my place in 10 minutes, still in flannel pants, shotgun in hand. We searched the whole house together. He did most of the searching. I kind of hovered behind him with a flashlight, heart still pounding like crazy. Nothing was out of place downstairs, nothing broken, no sign of forced entry. Then we went upstairs. The attic door was unlatched. Again. Not wide open this time, just cracked, same as before. And the crawl space, closed. That was somehow worse. I slept at Uncle Jude's that night. Didn't even pack a bag, just crashed on his couch, blanket wrapped tight, shoes still on. The next morning, once the sun was up and I had at least 2 cups of coffee in me, we went back. Uncle brought his bigger flashlight this time. We opened the attic, then the crawl space. It wasn't empty. In the far back corner, barely visible unless you stepped all the way in, there was a ratty old blanket rolled up, a plastic water bottle, dented and half full, and a small camping lantern. One of those battery-powered ones with a cracked handle. Someone had been living in there. We called the sheriff. He found boot prints out back leading into the woods behind our house. Some branches bent like someone had been moving through there recently. He told us whoever it was probably watched the house long enough to figure out when we were gone. Said it wasn't the first time someone in our area reported something like that. I don't know how long they were up there. From that night, I've never spent another night there alone. I was 27 when I agreed to house sit for my cousin. The place used to belong to his dad, this old 2-story house, tucked off a dirt road in a really quiet part of Pennsylvania, Edge Hollow or something like that. Not even a real town. He was fixing it up to rent out, but work had pulled him out of state for a few weeks, and he needed someone to keep an eye on the place. I wasn't working at the time, and I figured a change of scenery might be good. Maybe read a bit, reset my brain. I'd just gotten out of a weird breakup and honestly didn't have anywhere better to be. He gave me one key. Told me the water was running, power could be a little flaky if the wind picked up, and warned, kind of offhandedly, that the woods tended to throw sound in weird ways. Just don't freak yourself out, he said, like I was about to go camping in my own head. The first night there was fine, kind of boring even. I unpacked, made some pasta with the few groceries I brought, and found an old radio in the kitchen drawer that still worked. I flipped through static until I found some station playing bluegrass and left it low in the background while I read. Went to bed early. The place had this strange, quiet, not unpleasant, just thick, no cars. No distant hum of anything, just the occasional creak of wood, the way old houses breathe when they're not used to people. Then came the second night. I woke up around 2 in the morning to this knock, 3 sharp knocks. I sat up fast, heart thudding, and just listened. It sounded like the front door, not a pipe, not the house settling. It was too clean, too steady. 3 even knocks, like someone wanted to be let in. But the weird part? There hadn't been any other sound. No crunch of tires on the gravel, no footsteps on the porch, nothing leading up to it. I mean, I'd have heard someone approaching. The house was that quiet. I didn't get out of bed. just sat there, straining to hear anything else, until the light coming through the window changed enough that I knew it was morning. When I finally worked up the nerve to check, there was no one out front. No footprints in the dirt, no tire marks, nothing out of place. Just the kind of stillness that makes you feel like maybe you dreamed it, but you know you didn't. 2 days later, I took a walk down to a stream that ran about a quarter mile from the house. I'd found it by following a barely there trail through the trees. The whole thing took maybe 30 minutes, and I was gone less than an hour. When I got back, the front door was cracked open. And here's the thing, I always locked it. The deadbolt required the key even from the inside. It's just one of those habits I've had since I lived alone in a sketchy apartment back in college. Lock, check, double check. I froze for a second, called out, nothing. The house was still. I grabbed a hammer from the toolbox by the stairs and walked through every room, checking closets, behind the shower curtain, even inside the pantry. Nothing looked touched, no drawers open, nothing missing. But the kitchen light was on. I know I didn't leave it on. That night, I locked every window, pushed a chair under the doorknob, slept with my phone in my hand and the hammer under the mattress. No knocking this time. But I did wake up around 3 to this soft sound. The faucet in the kitchen was running. Just a slow stream of water. I walked down in the dark, barefoot, with the hammer still in my hand, and turned it off. Then I just stood there for a while staring at the kitchen window. That's when I noticed my reflection felt delayed. Like I'd moved my head, and a split second later my reflection followed. I thought maybe I was just tired. Blamed the weird lighting, but I didn't turn my back on it until I was back upstairs. The next afternoon I went around back to chop wood. There's this small shed back there, pretty ordinary, with a rusty lock that didn't actually latch. I hadn't opened it since I arrived, but I needed a hatchet. And there, sitting inside the shed like it had been dropped there casually, was my backpack. I always kept it zipped up under the bed in the guest room where I was sleeping. I checked it constantly, partly because it had my wallet, and partly because I'm a little obsessive like that. But there it was, out in the shed. I brought it inside, dumped it out onto the kitchen table. My phone charger was missing, so was the flashlight I kept in the front pocket. I hadn't used either since arriving. That night, I found the charger inside the bathroom cabinet. Like someone was putting things back in the wrong spots on purpose. That's when I started documenting everything. I drew a layout of the house on a piece of scrap paper and marked where I put stuff. No more drawers. No cabinets. I wanted to be able to glance around and see if anything had moved. I also started sleeping with the light on. Then things started getting weirder, more subtle. I was brushing my teeth one night and I noticed the hallway light was off like it should have been. A minute later I looked up and it was on. I rinsed my mouth, stepped into the hallway, and just as I did, the light clicked off. Just one soft sound, like someone flicked the switch. I stood there a while, not sure what to do. My skin felt cold all over. I didn't hear footsteps, no breathing, just the absence of sound. Like someone was standing there holding their breath. After that, I shoved the bedroom dresser in front of the door each night. I also stopped going outside completely. The woods felt wrong. The air was heavy, the trees too still. During the day, the window reflections were off just a fraction of a second too slow, just like the kitchen. At night, I saw shapes in the glass that didn't line up with anything in the room. Not people, just extra shadows, details that didn't belong. Then, 4 days before I was supposed to leave, I woke up to footsteps. Slow, dragging footsteps, not in the hallway above me. The attic, there's no actual staircase, just one of those pull-down ceiling hatches in the hall. I grabbed the broom and pushed it open. Some dust fell. No sound. I held my phone up, aimed the flashlight through the gap. Just old insulation, a few broken boxes, some scattered nails, and then, sitting off to the side near a rafter, was my charger. The same one I'd found in the bathroom 2 nights before, now back in the attic. That was it. I didn't sleep that night. Just sat on the couch with all the lights on and the hammer in my lap, staring at the hallway. Every so often, I'd hear something shift above me, slow creaks, like someone shifting their weight. pacing back and forth across the attic floor. At sunrise, I packed everything and left. Just left the key on the counter and drove 20 miles until I found a dingy motel. My brother Lenny owns this place way out in the Appalachian hills, not far from a little town called Dorsey Hollow. His house sits at the edge of a gravel road that turns into a dirt path, buried deep in the woods, an old timber frame house with a crumbling stone chimney and a porch that groans under your feet. He got it for a steal, which made sense once I saw how far it was from anything resembling a grocery store or gas station. He'd gone to help his in-laws move in Missouri and asked me to house sit for a couple of weeks. I work remotely, don't have kids or pets, so I said sure. Figured it would be a quiet break from the usual city buzz. I packed a duffel, loaded the car, and drove out thinking I'd catch up on reading, maybe fix up some things around the house for him. Easy favor. But the quiet out there, it's not the peaceful kind. It's a heavy kind. No sirens, no traffic, no neighbor mowing their lawn too early on a Saturday. Just the low hum of the fridge, the occasional pop of the fireplace, and this weird, constant creaking of the wood beams, like the house was exhaling under its own weight. It took me 2 nights to realize I'd stopped listening for other people. There were no voices, no footsteps overhead, nothing but me in the woods. I don't spook easy. I grew up in rural Georgia. I've camped alone. I've walked through downtown Atlanta at midnight, but there's something about being alone in a house where you can't see a single light out the window. Not a porch light, not a passing car, just trees and shadows. The kind of dark that makes you doubt your own shape in the mirror. The first few days were routine. I'd get up, log into work, microwave some coffee, take Zoom calls in Lenny's study. At night, I'd throw together something from the freezer, cue up some old sitcoms, and crash on the couch with the fire going. I didn't even go upstairs after the first night, didn't need to. Everything I needed was on the ground floor. It was that Thursday night when things started going sideways. I was in the downstairs bathroom brushing my teeth, foam halfway down my chin, when I heard it. 2 soft knocks on the back door. Just tap, like someone with their knuckle. I froze. The toothbrush just hung there in my hand. My first thought was animal. Maybe a raccoon brushed up against it, but it didn't sound like that. It sounded careful. I waited, ears straining. Nothing after that. No footsteps on the porch, no rustle in the brush. I spat, rinsed, and went to check. Turned on the floodlight. The backyard lit up. Just trees and the faint glint of the old propane tank. No movement. No eyes reflecting back at me. Still, I locked the door. Deadbolt and chain. Next morning, I noticed something odd. My boots. The work boots I always kick off by the fireplace. One of them had moved. Not far, maybe a couple feet to the left. I stood there, staring at it, trying to remember if I'd bumped it. Maybe I had. The floor's uneven in spots. I brushed it off. Until the next night. I came out of the bathroom and stopped cold. Both boots had swapped sides. Right was where the left should be. They were neatly placed, lined up, toes out, like someone had taken their time. I just stood there, stomach dipping. I hadn't touched them, hadn't moved them since I got in from a walk that morning. That's when I stopped brushing it off. Saturday, I had a client call over video, some back-end database thing I barely remember now. The connection flickered once, no big deal. Zoom glitched all the time out there, but later that afternoon, I went back to the recording to double-check a piece of the call. About halfway through, I paused. There was a shape, right at the top of the stairs behind me, barely in the frame, not moving. Just a vague outline, too tall to be a coat rack, too solid to be a shadow. I stared at it, rewound, paused again. There it was. My jaw tightened, and I hadn't gone upstairs since the day I arrived. I hadn't left the light on. There was nothing up there that should cast a shape like that. I checked the house top to bottom, every room. Nothing. Just stale air and the sound of my own footsteps. That night, I didn't even try to sleep upstairs. I stayed on the couch again, this time with the TV on low volume. Something about the infomercial voices was comforting. Someone talking about vacuums or miracle blenders. Just enough sound to break the silence. At around 2 in the morning, the TV clicked off. Lights too. Everything went dead. No storm, no wind, just sudden, absolute darkness. I sat up, heart thumping, grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight. The room looked the same, just stiller somehow, heavier. I got up and started toward the laundry room, where the breaker box was. As I passed the hallway, I heard it. Stairs, creaking, but not randomly. These were paced, like someone walking very, very slowly. Step, pause, step. I stopped breathing. My hand went cold around the phone. I turned and raised the light. No one on the stairs. But the door at the top, the one I know I had shut the day before, was open, wide open. I don't leave doors open. I have this thing about it. Always have. Maybe it's a control thing, maybe habit, I don't know. But I double-checked every room before I crashed. I remember shutting that door. I remember hearing the latch. I backed into the laundry room and locked the door. Sat on the floor with my phone light pointed at the crack beneath the door, waiting for shadows. 20 minutes later, everything blinked back on. The fridge hummed. The heater kicked in. I stepped out slowly. The living room looked the same, except the TV was on again, static now. Just that gray hiss. And the remote, it was across the room, on the floor by the front door. I didn't sleep. I sat with my back to the wall and a hammer in my lap, eyes on the hallway, until the sky turned pale. That morning I called Lenny, told him I was done. Didn't care if he was still in Missouri. I wasn't staying another night. He chuckled at first, said maybe a squirrel got in, or a raccoon, maybe both. I told him squirrels don't open doors. They don't stand still on staircases during video calls. He said I was just tired, probably stressed, maybe working too much. I hung up, started packing that afternoon. I was almost done when I reached for my car keys, gone. I always hang them on the little hook by the kitchen. I never move them. But now the hook was empty. I searched everywhere, every pocket, every drawer, under every cushion. I even checked the garbage. Nothing. That's when I just stood there in the middle of the living room, breathing like I'd run a mile. I pressed my hands to my face, trying to think. That's when I heard it. A voice, upstairs. Not loud, not whispering, just talking. Calm, muffled, like someone having a quiet conversation behind a closed door. It came from above, from the attic door at the end of the upstairs landing, except there was no attic. Or so I thought. There was a small door above the stairs, but I'd figured it was some kind of crawl space or old storage. I hadn't opened it, didn't even have a handle. Just a little latch up top. The voice murmured again. I couldn't make out the words. I stared at the ceiling. My mouth went dry. Then it spoke again, clearer this time. You can stay if you want. I ran. Barefoot, no flashlight, no bag. I didn't even grab my phone charger. Just bolted out the front door, down the gravel drive until I had signal. Called Rick, the neighbor Lenny barely knew. He showed up in his truck 10 minutes later and didn't ask many questions. He drove me into town. I stayed at a motel near the highway and left a key under the mat for Lenny. Told him he'd have to get the rest of my stuff himself. My uncle Lowell offered me his trailer for a bit while I was in between jobs and basically drifting. At the time, I was broke, tired, and didn't have anywhere better to go, so I took him up on it without asking too many questions. The trailer sat about 15 miles outside of a place called Briar Ridge, more of a dot on the map than an actual town. Lowell worked nights at a compressor station about an hour north and usually only came back every third day or so. He told me to treat the place like mine. Just keep the doors locked and don't mess with the breaker unless I had to. He left the pantry full beans, rice, pasta, all the staples, and even left me a key to his gun locker in case of wild dogs, though he didn't look me in the eye when he said it. The first few days were fine, peaceful even. I hadn't realized how much noise I'd gotten used to living near traffic and people until I was alone with nothing but wind and birdsong. My phone barely had signal unless I leaned off the porch rail, but I didn't mind. I slept in, read a few books I found stacked under the futon, and for once, didn't feel like I was behind on anything. Then I noticed the shack. It was early, maybe 7 a.m., and I was brushing my teeth, leaning over the sink in the tiny bathroom when I glanced out the window. The window was crusted with old grime, but through the streaks I saw something sitting at the base of the ridge. At first, I figured it was a hunting blind. A lot of people in that part of the county had them, but this didn't look like anything I'd ever seen. It was squat, slanted, and almost sunken into the dirt. No door, no clear front or back, just a crooked square shape that looked like it had been dropped there and then forgotten for a long time. It didn't sit right with me. There was something weird about the way it blended into the brush, like it was part of the landscape instead of something someone had built. When Lowell came back a couple days later to grab some gear, I asked him about it. Just casually, like, "Hey, what's that little shack down past the ridge?" He didn't even look up from the duffel he was zipping. "Ain't nothing to worry about back there," he said. Then he changed the subject and asked if the stove had been acting up again. That was the first little crack. The first moment something in me twitched. That night, I locked up tight, closed every window, slid the deadbolt, and turned off the porch light before climbing into bed with a book. I had barely fallen asleep when I heard it. One knock, right on the back wall. It wasn't loud, and it wasn't frantic. Just one solid tap, like someone giving a casual knock, waiting politely. I sat up so fast my book slid to the floor. I didn't move, didn't even breathe for a second. Just stared at the ceiling and listened. Nothing. The silence was thick, not peaceful like before, just still and unnatural. No bugs, no wind against the windows. It felt like the whole world had paused. I stayed in bed, heart pounding, until I finally dozed off again sometime after 4, the lamp still burning. Next night, same thing, one knock. Same wall. I got up this time. My legs felt hollow, like they belonged to someone else. But I made myself step into the kitchen and unlock the back door. I opened it just a crack and shined the flashlight outside. The beam barely made a dent in the darkness. The trees looked like black cutouts, flat and unmoving. I couldn't see the shack from there, just the edge of the ridge. No movement, no sound. I shut the door, locked it again, and jammed one of the kitchen chairs under the knob. Slept with the lamp on again. In the morning, I made myself go outside. I don't know why, maybe to prove to myself it was nothing, maybe to make it feel smaller. I circled around the back of the trailer and looked at the siding. Nothing was damaged, no marks on the wall. But when I looked down, I saw the prints. They were right up against the foundation, bare feet, pressed deep into the clay. The toes were wide and spaced strangely far apart, like whoever made them had splayed them out deliberately, and the left foot had 6 toes. I crouched there for a full minute just staring. My stomach felt cold, like it was slowly draining away from me. I didn't take a picture. I didn't even call Lowell. I told myself it had to be a prank, maybe some messed up local tradition, like a dare. That night, I left the porch light on. No knock. But sometime before sunrise, I jolted awake to the sharp smell of smoke. I rushed into the front room, and the back door was wide open. No flames, no fire. But on the kitchen table, the deadbolt was sitting neatly, like someone had taken it off piece by piece, all 4 screws lined up beside it. I didn't even check the rest of the trailer. I just called Lowell, told him someone had broken in. He asked if anything was missing. I said no. He paused, then asked if the light outside was still on. I turned to look. It wasn't. He told me to pack a bag and sit out on the porch. Told me not to go back inside if I could help it. Said he'd be there in a couple hours. I didn't sit. I just stood at the window with my duffel on my shoulder watching the woods. The sun hadn't come up yet, but I could see the trees in outline, black and sharp. I couldn't see anything moving, but I felt it. Like something was just inside the tree line, crouching low. Lowell got there just after 9. He didn't speak when he came in, just walked through the place slow, looking at everything like it was the last time he'd see it. He didn't ask me what happened. He didn't need to. We got in the truck and drove. He didn't tell me where we were going until we were halfway up a gravel road that looked like it hadn't been used in years. We passed an old gate, rusted half shut, and kept going until he finally pulled off near a clearing surrounded by scrub trees and blackberry vines. That's when he told me. He said his father, my grandfather, had seen things out there when he was young. Not animals, not people. Said there was a stretch of ground past the ridge, behind where that shack sat, where nothing grew. His father called it the split place. Said something had been buried there long before they settled the land. Something that still moved. I asked him why he let me stay there if he knew all that. He looked at me and said, because no one ever lasted more than 2 nights. I needed to know if it was still active. That was the last time I stayed with him. I was 22 when my uncle asked me to look after his place for a week. He and my aunt were driving up to Vermont to visit her sister, and they needed someone to keep an eye on things. Feed the goats, water the garden, bring in the mail, that kind of stuff. Nothing major. They live in Claiborne County, about 20 minutes outside Lenoir, in a log house that sits halfway up a heavily wooded ridge. Once you get past the gravel road and through the rusted cattle gate, there's nothing else around. No neighbors, no lights, just trees and silence. At the time, I thought it sounded peaceful. I got there on a Sunday afternoon. My uncle walked me through the basics, where the feed buckets were, how much to water the tomatoes, how to reset the breaker if the power went out, that sort of thing. He showed me how to double-check the latch on the goat pen and pointed out the landline in the kitchen. Before he left, he gave me one last piece of advice. Make sure you leave the porch light on at night and always chain the goat gate. Coyotes ain't the worst thing out here. Then he laughed like it was a joke, but I remember thinking it sounded forced. The first couple nights were fine, quiet even. I settled into a routine, fed the goats in the morning, watered the garden in the late afternoon, spent the evenings reading on the porch or flipping through the radio stations. There's no Wi-Fi up there, and barely any cell reception. If I stood out on the eastern corner of the porch and tilted the phone just right, I might catch a bar or two, but usually not enough to load anything. Honestly, I didn't mind. It was kind of nice to be cut off for a bit. Peaceful, still. Then came the third night. I woke up at some point after midnight. No dream, no noise, no thunderclap or creaky floorboard, just this sudden alertness, like my body had yanked me out of sleep before my brain could catch up. I sat up on the couch, heart ticking a little faster than usual, and realized there was this weird pressure in my ears. Not painful, just heavy, like when a storm front's coming in or you're driving down a mountain too fast. It made everything feel distant, like the air itself was too thick to hear through. I looked over at the front windows. Total darkness. No moonlight, no porch light. That didn't sit right with me. I remembered flipping the switch before bed, just like my uncle told me. I always did. It had become part of my nightly routine. But now it was dark out there, just trees and blackness pressing up against the glass. I got up and walked to the door barefoot. The floorboards were cold, rough under my feet. The switch for the porch light was still flipped up, which meant the bulb had either blown or something had tripped. I didn't love either possibility. I squinted out into the yard, but it was like staring into wet ink. The woods were just a wall of black. I didn't step outside. Instead, I locked the deadbolt again and stood there, staring at my own reflection in the glass. I must have been standing there for 30 seconds, trying to talk myself out of feeling nervous, when the phone in the kitchen rang. It's an old phone, and the bell is loud, sharp enough to jolt you out of your skin when the house is dead quiet. I turned so fast I nearly tripped over my own foot. The sound echoed weirdly in that space, cutting through the stillness like it didn't belong. I picked up slowly, trying to calm my heartbeat, and said hello. No response. Just this steady, soft hiss. Not the popping kind of static you get from a bad connection. It was more like a low, breathy hum, like a TV set to a dead channel, but quieter, more controlled. It went on for a few seconds. I was about to hang up when something clicked on the other end. It wasn't a voice, not a word, Just a sound. It reminded me of breathing, but too dry and narrow, like it was coming through a straw or a cracked reed. That lasted maybe 10 seconds. Then it stopped. Deadline. I stood there with the receiver still pressed to my ear for a little while, just listening to the silence. I didn't sleep again that night. Just sat in the recliner in the living room with my uncle's .22 across my lap. Every little creak in the wood, every pop from the stove made me flinch, but nothing happened. Not really. It just stayed silent. So quiet that the silence itself felt heavy, like something was pressing against the outside walls, testing their strength. The next morning I went to feed the goats, and something was off. Usually they're at the door waiting. They're noisy and impatient, especially when they know it's breakfast time. But that morning, they were huddled in the back corner of the shed, all 5 of them pressed together like they were trying to become one shape. I opened the door and called to them, rattled the food bucket. Nothing. They just stared at the open doorway like they were afraid to come out. I left extra food and water, closed the door, and walked back to the house without looking over my shoulder. That evening, I went out and replaced the porch bulb. I double-checked the circuit. Everything seemed fine. The light came on immediately. I even walked out into the yard to make sure it stayed on when I walked away from it. It did. I went inside, locked up, made tea, and turned the radio on to some static, just to have noise, you know? I couldn't stand the quiet anymore. The fuzz helped a little. I sat in the recliner with my book, pretending to read. Around midnight, I heard the screen door creak. It wasn't loud, more like a slow, uneven whine, like the door was being opened inch by inch. I held still and waited. It creaked again, then again. It didn't slam or swing. It was like someone out there was gently pulling it open and letting it drift shut over and over, just barely. I got up and went to the side window, the one that looks out over the porch. Pulled the curtain back, just a hair. The porch light was off. I didn't see anyone on the steps, didn't see anything moving at all. But the sound kept going. Slow creaks that never ended in a latch, like someone was testing how far they could move it without making a full noise. I called out, just a single, hello? Not loud, not confident. Just enough to make me feel like I'd tried something. The creaking stopped. I stood there for a long time, just watching through that sliver in the curtain. Nothing moved. The light never came back on. Eventually, I went back to the chair and sat with the rifle again. When morning came, the porch light was glowing again. The screen door was shut. I stepped outside, checked the latch on the goat pen. The gate was still closed, but the chain was hanging loose, swinging a little like someone had unlatched it and then left it. I tried calling my uncle. The landline was dead. I walked out to the road to check my phone. Still no signal. Not even a flicker of a bar. I stood there for 5 full minutes, holding the phone up, walking in circles, even restarting it. Nothing. It was like something had blanketed the entire ridge in silence. That night, I stayed up again. Around 2:30, I heard tapping. Just faint taps, spaced apart like someone lightly rapping their finger against the glass. First from the living room window, then the kitchen, then the one in the back bedroom. I didn't move, didn't go look. Just sat there holding the gun like it was going to solve anything. Eventually, the tapping stopped. I tried to breathe quietly, but it was hard. My jaw ached from how tight I was clenching it. Then around 3:30, I saw something pass by the front window. I only caught a glimpse. It was tall, too tall, and it didn't move right. It didn't walk. It sort of glided, stiff and smooth, like its joints weren't connected properly, like it was being pulled along a track I couldn't see. I dropped to the floor, stayed there. That's when the tapping came back, but this time it wasn't on the windows, it was on the walls. Just single, slow taps, moving around the house in no particular pattern, like something was checking, listening. It lasted until just before sunrise. Then it stopped, completely. And suddenly, everything was normal again. The landline worked. The goats were out and eating. My phone buzzed with 3 missed texts. My uncle called that afternoon, said they'd be back early because my aunt's sister had some kind of emergency. I didn't ask. When they pulled into the driveway the next day, I was already packed. My uncle didn't ask why I looked wrecked. He just handed me a 20 for gas and thanked me for staying. My name's Ren. Mom was heading out to Greenville to stay overnight with my aunt. My cousin Nathan was having minor surgery, nothing life-threatening, but he was the youngest and kind of a worrier, so she wanted to be there. I told her I'd be fine alone. I meant it. We lived a little outside of Linton Ridge. The house was old but solid. It sat at the edge of about 10 acres of woods that backed up against state land, quiet, secluded. I'd grown up out there, used to the creaks and groans that came with old beams and strong wind. Some people would hate it, how dark it got, how far we were from other people. But to me, it felt like breathing room. That night, it had just started to feel like fall. Not cold exactly, but that edge was creeping into the air. The trees were already turning early oranges and browns, and leaves kept skittering across the roof like something pacing. The sound was sharp enough to make me glance up more than once. I remember thinking it felt like the kind of night where you'd either sleep like a rock or not sleep at all. Dinner was instant ramen, the good kind with the little oil packet. Fed the dogs. Junebug, our old coonhound, and the two terrier mixes, Kip and Roscoe. They were loud, high-strung little things, but good at sounding the alarm. Nothing ever came near the house without them raising hell. Before it got fully dark, I went around locking up kitchen door, mudroom, cellar hatch. Standard stuff. I kept a big flashlight next to the door, even though our generator was solid. It flipped on within seconds if the power cut, but my stepdad had drilled that habit into me. Always know where your flashlight is. He'd been gone 2 years, but some routines stuck like glue. He died right in that house, in the middle of a living room during an afternoon thunderstorm. One second he was standing with a wrench in his hand, and the next, he just wasn't. No signs, no warning. Just collapsed. Sometimes when it's too quiet, I still catch myself listening for the sound of his boots, or the way he used to mutter about needing to check the damn breaker again, little things you don't think will matter until they're gone. Anyway, I was stretched out on the couch with a blanket and a geometry workbook, trying to knock out a few assignments before the week caught up with me. The TV was on, low volume, something forgettable playing in the background. I was halfway through a problem when it hit me. I hadn't heard the dogs in a while. That wasn't normal. I sat up and listened. Nothing. No claws on the floor, no random barking, not even a yawn from Junebug. I called once from the couch, then again when I stepped onto the porch. Still nothing. Just the breeze moving leaves and the steady hum of the generator somewhere behind the house. I tried whistling. Normally that got them moving, even if they were off sniffing deer tracks. Still nothing. That's when the back of the neck feeling kicked in. I pulled on my coat and boots, grabbed the flashlight, and started down the back slope, sweeping the beam over the edge of the woods. My mind was racing through explanations. Maybe they chased a rabbit into the trees. Maybe Junebug's old hips gave out and the others stuck with her. I kept calling their names, trying not to let the silence get to me. By the time I reached the creek, I was more annoyed than worried. The flashlight beam cut across tree trunks, glinted off wet rocks. Everything was still. I turned to head back, and that's when I noticed the gate. It was open. The back fence ran along the edge of the yard, separating our cleared space from the thicker woods. My stepdad built it himself, cedar posts, wire mesh, decent height. The latch always stuck. You had to jiggle it just right to get it open. But now it was wide open, swinging slightly. It hadn't just come loose. It looked like someone had pushed it hard enough to snap the tension. Something about that gate made my chest tighten. I didn't hear any breathing, no footsteps, but I still felt watched. Like something was clocking my movements just out of view. I turned fast and started heading back. Halfway up the hill, I heard it, the porch door slamming shut. I stopped. I hadn't left it open, and the sound wasn't casual. It was loud, definite, not the wind. I flicked off the flashlight and dropped low behind a tree. I could see the house from that angle, partially. The porch light, which should have still been glowing from the generator backup, was out, completely dark. No light from the windows either. But after a few seconds, a faint flicker pulsed in one of the side windows. The TV was still on. Something was moving in front of it. I crept around the house, slow, careful where I stepped. From the edge of the porch, I could just barely see inside. Someone was standing in the living room, between the couch and the TV. They weren't moving, just standing there, like they were trying to figure out what the couch was for. I couldn't see their face. But the way their arms hung straight down, stiff and weird, and how their shoulders were hunched, it was wrong. The body language didn't read as normal. It was like whoever it was hadn't quite figured out how to be a person yet. I froze. For a minute, I just stared, trying to convince myself it was a shadow, a reflection, anything. I was reaching for my phone when they turned their head just slightly, just enough. I ducked back, heart slamming, not all the way toward me. Just enough to know they'd noticed something. I waited, longest minute of my life. When I peeked again, they were gone. No figure. Just late-night infomercials lighting up the walls. I didn't go to the door. I backed off the porch and went around to the basement window. The frame stuck a bit, but I got it open and crawled inside, landing hard on the cement. I kept low, grabbed the crowbar from under the workbench, and moved up the stairs, every step slow, trying not to make them creak. In the kitchen, the lights were on again, just like normal. But when I looked closer, things didn't match. The coat rack had one more jacket than usual. Bright red windbreaker, no idea whose it was. The floor mat by the door had muddy prints, one direction only. In, none leading out. I edged forward and looked into the living room. Nobody. TV was on. Couch empty. Everything exactly how I left it. Except the remote was gone. I was standing there trying to make sense of it when the sound came again. Clack. The third stair from the top. I didn't move, didn't breathe. Then another step, closer now at the hallway landing. I raised the crowbar, my palms wet. And that's when I saw them, standing at the end of the hallway, back to me, still a stone, facing my bedroom door like they belonged there. They weren't tall, about my height. But something about how their arms hung, how their head tilted too far to the side, it made my skin crawl. It wasn't just stillness, it was wrongness. Like a puppet before the strings get pulled. I should have shouted, should have run, but I just stood there. Then, as if they heard some internal cue, they moved sideways into my room. I bolted, out the front door, down the hill, through the trees to the neighbor's place. Didn't stop until I was pounding on Joe's door, yelling his name. He opened it with his shotgun in his pajama pants, blinking hard. He didn't ask questions, just let me in. The sheriff came 20 minutes later. They searched everything, top to bottom, no forced entry. No extra jacket, no footprints, no broken locks. The dogs were back, tied up to the oak like they'd been there the whole time. I stayed with Joe and his wife that night. Didn't sleep. When Mom came back the next morning, I told her everything. She didn't doubt me. But what could she say?